It's been a few months of this crisis, and the suffering of the people is quite evident when you look at images of long lines to get essential items, long lines to get fuel, gas, medicines, food shortages. So, really, for several weeks and months, many people have been suffering. And that has also led to protests, peaceful protests, where people have come to the streets because there's really not much they can do. And in that protest, they have called for a system change and for the resignation of the president and the then government. So, really, kind of the suffering has seen different forms of people coming out and speaking out. But really, the situation on the ground is really quite dire.
Well, there has been a change. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa stepped down. Since then, what's happened to the protests on the streets? Are they still continuing with the same momentum?
Well, the protests were very much very sustainable and in a sense really got results of getting a very powerful prime minister and government to resign. And the protests have continued. Tomorrow is the 50th day of a big protest in Colombo. So it's quite significant that these protests have continued. It's been very peaceful, largely peaceful, except for violence we saw on the 9th of May. And thousands of people have come out despite the hardships to show that they want to see a change. Now, there is a new prime minister and a new government, and a lot of people are looking to some kind of change. But at the moment, at least, we haven't seen significant changes in terms of the economic situation. So the protests are likely to continue.
Are there concerns over violence breaking out again amid further police crackdowns, possibly?
So the violence on the 9th was unprecedented in that, the peaceful protests continued for weeks, and then suddenly you saw this violence. And the violence started from the then Prime Minister's side, and mobs were unleashed, and it was unfortunate. Several deaths occurred and properties destroyed. But since then, there's been also intimidation against those who've made complaints on the violence, those who've been eyewitnesses. So there is a concern that some of the violence also led to new forms of intimidation of those who are witnesses and victims of the violence. So there is a worry that there might be new cycles that happen. But I also want to make a point that the economic crisis also raises a lot of triggers for new violence. So there's extreme concern in terms of different aspects in Sri Lanka.
Bhavani, what is the government doing to address the financial situation? How are discussions going with the IMF?
So the IMF concluded initial discussions. They have issued a statement saying they are looking to the government to come up with reforms, especially in terms of microeconomic stability and debt sustainability. So there is expectation now the government, the prime minister who was now taken on the finance portfolio, will come up with some proposals. So we are yet to see this. So the IMF conversation continues. These are very early days. But also the president has now reached out to the international community requesting for support. The Japanese and the Indian governments, they have agreed to explore what can be done. There is also much work to be done in terms of bridge financing. So there's a lot of things happening. So we'll have to see, actually.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa vows change, even promising to build a new cabinet without any Rajapaksas. But for many, it's too late.
Well, the call from the protesters are very clear. The president needs to go. So in a sense, we're seeing one Rajapaksa still in office, still in government, and that's an office that's extremely powerful. So while most of the other Rajapaksas have resigned because of public pressure, we need to be very mindful. They were not going to go home till the pressure built. There is one Rajapaksa still in office, and those calls from the protesters are very clear. They are not going to go home till the president goes home.
And what has happened to Mahinda Rajapaksa, his brother who stepped down as Prime Minister? What role is he now playing?
Well, on the 9th of May, after his resignation, he and his family actually left his official residence and went into hiding and was in a naval base. Subsequently, and that was a time where the Rajapaksa's popularity had really hit rock bottom. Since then, they have come out. And so there is now they are very much back in the fray. They are not in government, but they are members of parliament. So we'll have to see how they continue in this present climate.
Okay, well, we'll continue to watch. Bhavani Fonseca, thanks so much for joining The World.
Thank you.